Stress, welcome to the show, buddy. I'm so happy to have you on.
I can't believe you just did that.
You like that extra españoles intro?
Good. That was very good.
Yeah, I know you're consistently impressed with my Spanish skills.
Exactly. Your new words every time.
Yep. So before the podcast, you're about to tell me a story about your grandfather and wine. We're having ourselves a glass of some indiscriminate alcohol-filled red juice right now.
So my grandfather, who passed away 2 years ago at 93 years old, never had a surgery in his life.
Get out of here.
Literally was never hospital-ridden or bedridden in his entire life.
Till 92?
92. Until the day that he passed away. So he used to drink, as for as long as I can remember, a bottle of red wine a day and smoke a pack of cigarettes.
Dude hit the lottery.
And he used to walk downstairs. He lived in this third floor apartment. He used to walk downstairs to this bar and would sit down. And some days when he drank a little too much, he would literally get up and start singing in the bar. He was a baritone.
Really? In like a choir?
And he did it on stage when he was younger.
Yeah.
Not a choir, singer. And he did opera, and he would literally, but that was in his 60s. So 30 years later, I don't think he remembered any of it. So he would just sit down and sing like a fraction of a song when he drank too much.
That is awesome.
Happiest man I've ever met. Lived until he was 93 years old.
Damn.
Never had an issue in his life.
What song would he sing?
Oh my God, you wouldn't know this.
Backstreet's back, all right.
Not quite. Sounded more like Julio Iglesias.
That's probably more realistic. Can you imagine your 92-year-old grandpa just really into Britney Spears?
Seriously. He would be into Britney Spears, but not for the singing.
Yeah, that's true. He just starts fucking rapping some Lil Yachty or some shit.
He used to go after the housekeeper all the time. There's this Colombian lady, and he used to run around and chase her around and go like, he just didn't care.
Growl at her?
Didn't care.
Is that an effective strategy?
Seriously. It must be a Spanish thing.
Yeah.
He did not care. It was fantastic.
There was one time I was in downtown San Diego in the gas lamp district. And, like gas lamps, this fucking crazy shit show, and everybody's all fucked up doing things. And I'm walking, and the gas lamp, it's like a regular city street. It's decently wide. And then this guy in front of me is all fucked up. He starts barking. He just goes, hey, girl, hey. And she's not looking at him right. Hey! He's getting all frustrated. He's like, ruff, ruff, ruff. He starts fucking barking. Like, everybody turns around because they think there's like a rabid dog. It's just this dude barking. It's just like, how many times has that worked for you, bro? Exactly 0 times?
That's what he wants the outcome to be.
Yeah, that's true.
Call the police.
Call the dog catcher.
I want to sleep on a cell today.
Maybe he was actually like really into dogs.
Maybe. Did he have a dog?
Conspiracy theory.
You never know.
Maybe.
You never know.
I don't know.
He was a dog in a past life.
Yeah, it's true. The longevity thing is weird because like your grandpa, mine is still alive, and that dude has been eating billions of cigarettes a day his whole life. Never really had a health problem at all.
That's insane.
The fuck is going on with that gene pool?
I strongly believe that there's a inverse correlation between how much you give a shit about something and how long you're gonna live.
Oh yeah.
Like you literally don't give a shit about anything, and then you live a long life.
I don't disagree with that.
I swear to God.
Well, stress is real.
Absolutely.
Cortisol's real.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and we know that shit ain't good for you.
Well, it simulates real world situations, right? Of fight or flight, or making your heart pump faster, increasing your blood pressure, et cetera, et cetera. So
yeah, it's almost like we're genetically, encoded to be running away from saber-toothed tigers
every half an hour.
Every half an hour, and jumping up in trees and probably seeing your entire family get ripped to death and eaten alive in front of you. And now, like, the way that manifests in 2019 is like, oh, I had a bad day at work because Cindy was talking shit, and then, my fucking phone wouldn't work, and the traffic was bad. And like, how fucking easy do we have it now?
I think that's one of the problems, that our baseline for measuring what's difficult has completely changed, right? Like, I was thinking about this the other day. If you ask half of the LA population to navigate the city and driving from point A to point B, they wouldn't know how to do that without Google Maps. They literally would not know how to do that, which is mind-boggling. And so I think it's getting to the point where, figuring out the streets of a city, figuring out what the best sort of routes are in traffic, actually develop something in your brain. It's like problem solving.
Yeah.
And suddenly we've completely eliminated that ability. And so, I remember when you and I grew up, you had all of these different, activities you would do outside, and, you go treasure hunting, whatever it was. And it felt like solving problems constantly. And you use your hands and you use your brain and you sort of run around and interact with other people. And right now, the substitute for that is, a mind game in your phone. And so it's a little concerning.
Yeah, now it's Snapchat.
Now Snapchat.
Now it's like,
So what's like, what part of your brain is that developing?
Snapchat? It's developing the it's developing that part. Whatever part that is. It's the
That's how every teenager's brain works.
I think so. And like, I grew up with MySpace, right? But dude, to get on MySpace,
barely.
Well, nah, yeah, barely. That's true.
You have 56K modems.
Yeah,
like in order to even connect to the internet, you had to wait 5 minutes. I hope your mom didn't get a phone call.
That's true.
Exactly.
Remember that fucking sound?
Yeah.
Bro, when we still had dial-up when I was reaching puberty, And so I'm on the computer, right? And I'm like, I want to find myself a nice young lady to look at. Mm-hmm. And it would take like 10 minutes to download one shitty photo.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, and what I would do is I would go and I would get this blanket off of the couch and I'd throw it over the computer to like muffle the noise of the fucking dial-up internet noise so I could stare at pictures of boobs on the internet. I was like 13 or whatever. But the problem now is like you have that access in your pocket and it's instant.
Well, it removes, you don't have to solve anything. Like you only have to remember your freaking passcode. Right. Not even that.
Nope. Read your face.
It was hilarious. A couple of days ago, we were driving and we were just, for some reason, we were talking about I think I was talking to one of my younger employees about the transition between analog and digital. And one of the examples that I gave was, I was explaining what a cassette tape was, and I was explaining because think about it, right? A 20-year-old today, or 19-year-old or interns don't even know what a cassette tape is. Right. And so I was explaining that to them. I was talking to them about how you like wound it with a pencil, and what a VHS tape was, and like what you did with them, and how you would record stuff, and then your mom would come and record a fucking soap opera, and then you were like going to play your favorite TV show, and then the fucking soap opera would show up halfway through. And all of these different things that were kind of mechanical and required understanding, and like sort of, you could hack some of those things. Nowadays, in order for you to hack an iPhone, you have to be a pretty experienced software engineer, or to hack anything, basically. And so, part of me just misses that. And I think the younger generations are fundamentally different because they did not experience that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, and you do sound like you're about 75 years old right now. You should probably just grow and join your fucking grandpa sing opera songs in the fucking rest home. It's, because we're pretty young guys and we grew up in the digital age with all this technology, chat rooms and this and that and AIM and Yahoo Chat and MySpace and stuff. And, it's like, I feel like every generation says that about the next one. Oh, these fucking guys got all this weird shit, But it is true, and I think we're somewhat a product of that as well. And the interesting thing, though, is that I think that somehow, as humans, we have sort of this innate desire for more manual type of things, like podcasting, for instance. Like the thing that we're doing right now was the most, like the peak of radio was in what, like 1940? 30, 50?
Well, the 50s and 60s is when television really picked up in American households, yeah.
Right? And so, but now podcasts are like more popular than they've ever been, and it's just sound that's been around forever. It's kind of crazy. It's like, it's making a little...
A comeback.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe it might be nostalgia, or the desire for people to sort of go back to something that it reminds them somehow of their past. I remember another funny story of my granddad. He built our house where my mom lives right now in the 1950s.
Which is where?
It's in Vigo, Spain. You know very well. And in 1956, he bought the first radio in the neighborhood. And he used to turn on the radio in the backyard, and all the neighbors would come and sit around the fucking radio just to listen to radio programs.
Holy shit.
And but the interesting thing is that brought them together, right? And like that would escalate into like bottles of wine, and then like smoking, and then just chatting, and then it was 4 a.m. before anybody went home.
Wow, over radio.
Over radio, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder what are the things today that make that happen for us?
Alexa. I bet you ain't allowed in my house.
You can't even bitch at each other. I was like, what's the answer to something? It's like, oh, let me ask Google.
Yeah, let me ask Siri real quick. See what that bitch is up to.
Life has become so uninteresting.
It is, right? Like, but yeah, it's super. It is very interesting, but in the same by the same token, like I do think that there's a problem when people don't go outside, when they don't interact with their physical environment. Mm-hmm. I think it's just unhealthy. I think that there's something in the human animal, right, that desires to be in nature, to go for a fucking hike, like all this really simple shit. And it's just so incredibly easy to just stay inside and play VR or do whatever, right? Even like listen to shit, watch shows on YouTube. You don't have to ever really leave your house. And when VR and AR really take off, it's going to exacerbate the problem, I think.
Well, think about the way your brain works, right? Your brain is always looking for the path of least resistance. And so when you make things extremely easy, what's going to happen is the tendency of your mind, and as a result of your own activities, is going to be to stay in and play video games. Because the harder thing is to get outside and walk around, right? And so one of the biggest questions is how do you start reframing the conversation with people about, making people do things with each other and do things outside easier than turning on the PlayStation, right? Nobody uses PlayStation today, probably.
I think they still play PlayStation.
Yeah,
shout out to PlayStation. I don't fucking play.
So there's another funny story when so Patrick and I, when we started the company in San Francisco,
Your company is
my company. We were working out of his living room.
His company is Catalog for the people listening. And they also make like all the really cool shit that you see on Instagram, like all that super fucking like artsy, this and that color fucking gelled, cool like skin cream or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's what this guy does, makes beautiful content.
All of that content.
I'm sorry.
The interesting thing is that making content is a logistical problem. It's a highly physical, manual piece of labor, right? But the results are so digital. But anyway, that's sort of a segue. But the idea is we're in the living room, and we used to work long hours, 14-hour days, whatever. And Patrick used to have these friends from Google to come and play video games. And at the time, I didn't know what to do because we were in Daly City, didn't have a car. It's not San Francisco, so I can just walk outside and like walk to the city. And then I didn't want to pay for an Uber, so I used to sit in the house and do nothing until one day. He basically bought me FIFA.
Bought you FIFA?
Because he's like, this is the only game you're ever going to play. So he bought me FIFA with a PlayStation so that I could actually play.
Like a true European.
Like a true
Spaniard.
That was yeah. And so I used to be in San Francisco Monday to Friday. And in the evenings, I had nothing to do, so I would just play FIFA. And then on Friday, I used to fly back to LA.
Dude, I'll tell you one thing is like, I don't have an addictive personality, generally speaking, except for like, I do get addicted to like creating new shit and like learning new skills and things like that. I get legitimately addicted to those things, which is a healthy thing for the most part, I think, with one exception. And that exception is Call of Duty.
Interesting.
I will fucking murder people on the internet
hours.
on Call of Duty. I could sit there, bro. I'm telling you what, it's like if you just put a fucking Xbox in front of me with Call of Duty Black Ops and a case of Diet Mountain Dew, bro, I could go on for fucking like 10 hours nonstop. So I don't allow myself around video games for that reason. I employ the discipline, don't allow myself around it.
I've noticed that you don't have a television here.
Yeah, I also don't have that.
You don't?
I haven't had one since 2005, 6.
That's so interesting.
Since I was 18.
I only know 2 people that are friends of mine that don't have television, and it's one. You're one of them, and then there's another friend I have, Brian, and that actually doesn't, like, intentionally doesn't want to have a television.
Yeah.
And I think it's a phenomenal idea.
Yeah, I also just don't. Whenever I have like this weird anxiety about TVs and movies and stuff like that, like if I'm watching a show, I feel genuinely like this innate instinct that I'm wasting my entire life.
That's true.
Like there's this thing in my head, like, like the devil and the angel or whatever. And I don't know which one it is or one of both, but they're just like, you're wasting your life. What are you doing?
Do something productive.
Yeah, do something productive.
Produce.
What are we doing?
That's true. That's true.
The end is near. Run.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the conversations that I see happening in bars and places like that are, a lot of them are about Netflix shows and about what you've watched and what I've watched. And it's super interesting because that's changed a lot, I would say, recently.
That's some LA shit
people,
too.
Yeah, people have a lot to relate to in the shows. The interesting thing for me is that I only tolerate shows that make me think or are somehow contrarian and like provoke some sort of thoughts. And the conflict, the mental conflict and challenges that come with watching those shows and me trying to figure things out is the only thing that gets me entertained. Ari watches Keeping Up with the Kardashians and all that stuff.
Oh.
And I'm like, every time I see that on TV, I'm like, oh my God. I need to run away.
Oh man.
It's I could not.
I could not do the real question, Jacobo, is, do you keep up with the Kardashians?
I don't. Well, I mean, look, I drive through La Cienega and Santa Monica every day, and all I can see is a fucking billboard the size of my living room, or twice as big, probably. That says something about makeup. So
yep.
I think it's one of the Kardashians. So.
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest things. One of the weird cultural phenomenon.
Hey, look,
it's like people's obsession with people.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, but so I read this incredibly interesting article the other day. It's called The Psychology of Money. And there's about 14 sort of parts to it that explain about different aspects of the relationship of people with money. One of the 14 points basically explain the concept of, when and the story was this guy was a valet parking guy at a hotel in LA. And every day he would see all these people come in with very expensive cars. And he explains a story about this guy that would drive a Ferrari every day. A Ferrari is like $250,000. And this guy would drive in with a Ferrari every day. And what most people think is, wow, that guy is driving the Ferrari. He must be very wealthy. But what this guy is thinking is, well, that guy is $250,000 less wealthy than he was before he bought the Ferrari. And so the whole idea is that, people think they want to be millionaires, but what they want is the things that come with being a millionaire. What they fail to understand is, if you become a millionaire, it's because you haven't spent the money. The minute you spend the money, you cease to be a millionaire.
Absolutely.
And so the part of it that was really interesting is when you look at somebody and you're the guy driving the Ferrari, you feel really good about it and all that stuff. When people look at you, they're actually not admiring you. They're putting themselves in your shoes and thinking about how they would feel if they would be driving the Ferrari. So you don't matter at all, right? That's the whole point of why like people that are famous and wealthy and so on often struggle to have friends, because people are not actually admiring them. They're projecting themselves into their lifestyle and then imagining that in their heads. Isn't that interesting?
Blowing my mind right now. You know what that reminds me of is like, so you know, I'm a fan of all genres of music, generally speaking, but there is shit music. There just is. And some of the lyrics are horrible. Like really, really bad, poorly thought out lyrics, right? And oftentimes the worst lyrics are in rap. They just are. And you know, when I'm listening to some of those really stereotypically terrible lyrics, right? It's like, I'm in my fucking Ferrari, right? Riding on 22s, hose in the back, fucking cheddar flying out the windows. And it's basically just like one giant braggadocious, like lyrical amalgamation of bullshit. And when I'm listening to it, I'm like, I would never want to hang out with a guy that's just telling me about that guy. It's like you ever hung out with somebody who's just nonstop just bragging about shit that they own? That would be so fucking annoying. I could not imagine doing that. But like what you're saying, what I fail to realize is, oh, these people aren't thinking about it like, oh, that guy could be my friend and talk about his 22-inch rims. They are actually thinking like, oh, I am that guy. I got the 22s.
There you go. It's a very different psychology.
Right.
When you think about it.
Right.
And then, you know, that explains why those people are often very lonely and very depressed. It's really hard to make friends in that situation because all that people want is the things you have. They don't want you.
Right.
And so, you know, I was exposed to that for many years when I came to LA, as you very well know.
I do.
And you know, witnessing some of the people that I see the world looking up to, and you look at it from the inside, and you realize they're just as flawed as we are. The difference is that their reach is so big that when those people say things that others want to follow, they get everywhere. But they also realize that they cannot be human, because the minute they become human, the magnifying of that information can actually tear people apart. So they smile to the audience, but they cry when they're alone.
Yeah.
And it's the craziest thing.
Yeah.
Because they're just as flawed as we are.
Yeah, and a lot of them, you know, I think it is the thing that really gets in the heads of people like that. And I think it's like they get in their own heads a little bit. Like, oh, I'm this, you know, this vision of some human that actually isn't really them. Like it's some version of them for sure, but it's not them, you know? And I think when you get wrapped up in sort of that outward ego and you're not real, like you're not being real on the outside, and then everybody's obsessed with like some, you know, facade of you know, a skin suit of who you are, then it gets really tricky. Because like you said, as soon as you actually are who you are, then all the wheels fall off.
So here's a tough question for you. How do you draw a balance between being 100% authentic and being who the people you want to influence needs?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, for me, for better or for worse, and you know me well, you're one of my best friends, you know, it's like I just am real all the time. And so like, fuck it, you know, and so like sometimes that's good. And sometimes it has negative externalities. But at the end of the day, I feel like I know who I am. I'm comfortable with who I am. I know I'm a good dude. I know I have people's interests, best interest in mind. Like, and so, you know, if me being me or making dumb jokes about stupid shit, you know, makes stuck up people angry or whatever, then fuck yourself. I don't know. It's a bad piece of advice because I think that maybe it's a bad piece of advice to be like, just be you. Because if you're a shitty person, that's a terrible advice. Right? Like if you're a total piece of shit and you're just like, dude, the best piece of advice, man, just be you. And then you are you, and everybody hates you because you're a total piece of shit. Maybe that's not the best thing for you. So I do think it's highly personalized, but there's some, you know, level of comfortability in each person's mind. I think in terms of like how raw they can be versus how buttoned up they have to be for various reasons, right? Like the number one thing, at least in my mind, is money. You know, like don't do anything to fuck up your money. And I would never suggest anybody does anything to fuck up their money. Because I think without that, then you go into a whole different spiral of despair and sadness and all this different shit. So it is an interesting balance, and I think it just takes a lot of introspection, maybe a little bit of mushrooms. You see? This is
a lot of things in life can be solved with that.
Yeah, that's true.
So here's another question. I think something that I've thought about a lot. You and I didn't grow up in wealthy households, but we do have friends that are entrepreneurs that sort of run around the same circles than we do, that did grow up in affluent homes. And what I found really interesting is the relationship with fear that you and I have. It's very different than the one they have. We've built something from nothing. We've built companies and we've built friendships. We've gotten to where we are as people and professionals on our own accord, right? Without a lot of financial or intellectual support. And so, when I talk to friends of mine that had parents that supported them, that were educated, that, provided with a safety net, they seem a lot less afraid than we do sometimes. I feel like, when we build something, at the back of our mind, there's always this little thing, this little voice that is like, you better not fuck up, because if you do, you're hitting the ground. You're hitting the all-time low. And so do not let yourself get there. But when I talk to them, they never seem scared about these things. And I wonder, do those people have the same drive than we do, or where does the drive come from?
That's an interesting question, and you're right. Like, one of the weird things that I've realized, at least through sort of my entrepreneurial journey over the last X amount of years, is there's a lot of people that came from a lot of opulent wealth or parents that had all their shit together, or educated, or you name your litany of circumstantial variables. But the reason that they don't have to fear as much is because if you fall into a pit of foam doing a backflip, no danger, right? But if you're doing a backflip and you're going to fall, if you don't land right, you're going to fall on the concrete, dire consequences, right?
Absolutely.
And so, I do find, generally speaking, that people that have that foam pit don't have as strong of a drive, especially when things get rough, to just keep going and eat plates of shit to keep doing what they need to do.
It's such an interesting perspective. Along the same lines, I was talking to a mentor of mine, very successful, middle age, lives in LA, has done so well in business that he basically doesn't necessarily have to work. He does because he enjoys it and he likes challenges and learning new things. But he always tells me, he grew up, by the time he was 16, he dropped out of high school, slept in his car for months at a time, built himself from nothing to, a multimillionaire. And he was talking to me about his kid, and I find remarkable the way that he educates his child. I mean, he's a tremendous dad, super stimulating. It really keeps his child is a sort of learning new things and going and so on. He's 5 years old. But one of the things that he said to me was, doesn't matter what I do, he will never feel what I felt, right? Because I will educate him on being humble and being respectful and understanding the value of money and what things costs, but he'll never feel it in his skin the way I did. And one of the conversations I had was like, how did that change you? Like, how is that going to make for a different human being? And what are the positives and negatives? Like, what is your child going to have that you never did? And what are you going to have, or what do you have that your child will never have access to from a mindset perspective?
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think that inherent drive is just not going to be there. But the question is that drive out of fear, or is the drive out of just wanting more or wanting better or bigger?
I think it's both. I think that, especially when you don't come from anything and you sort of live in that poverty cycle, at least, I've lived it, you are desperate. You feel despair. That's not a feeling you can give someone. You can give them the feeling of struggle, right? You can make them do hard things. You can make them get uncomfortable and have respect, for different sorts of struggles that people do have. And you can put them in stressful situations, certainly, but there's just no equivalent to that. And the drive, I think that, at least for me, a big part of what drives me is the fear to never be poor again. Like living in the fucking hood, relying on government assistance, any of that kind of shit, I will tell you, is the most shitty situation you can possibly fucking be in. And I hear a lot of guys. I was watching this guy who has a relatively big name. I'm not going to name his name, but watched his video that he was, on Instagram. He's like, I was on this fucking stage, and he's, making money was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I, was so much happier before I became a multi-millionaire and all this shit. And I'm like, yeah, says the fucking rich guy. You know what I mean? Oh yeah, rich guy says, I was way happier when I was poor. Shut the fuck up. It's just not true. Like, if you don't have a baseline level of security, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If you don't have that baseline blanket of security, you're not going to be as happy, period.
Because you have to worry about some of the most basic needs in your life.
Yeah, you're stealing food. It's
very interesting. I always wonder about the impacts. And one of the interesting things is, I find happiness is a tricky word for me, because, I feel like, especially in this country, there's such an emphasis on, build the American dream, do all these different things, be happy. There's this pursuit. Where I come from, it's implicit. And so it's implicit, is like, it's sort of part of the fabric of society, is that people are satisfied. Right. And the results of that is that there isn't that much ambition. Like, people are not as ambitious as they are in the United States. There isn't as much immigration of people coming and telling themselves the stories like, I got nothing, I want something. But I would argue that people are happier. And I would also argue that leaving that place and leaving that culture and moving here has made me more curious, more interesting, perhaps live a more intriguing and fun and sort of a life full of new experiences. But it's also made that happiness has become a more tricky word and something that is a lot harder for me to understand. Because I do feel that I'm building this castle, and I constantly look around and I'm like, oh, the waves are coming, or this person is about to walk through it and break it down, or is the structure sound enough? Like, I'm constantly looking around being like, okay, what is going to fuck up?
Are the Mongols at the gates? Right? Like,
it's true.
On the trebuchet!
Okay. That's one way to put it.
Yeah.
The Mongols at the gates.
For real, dude.
What have you been reading?
Nothing about the Mongols, unfortunately. Probably should. This is the way my brain works, man.
Well, I'm glad I'm fueled for that.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you're 100% right. It's happiness is super duper tricky, and I think that the disconnect comes from, like, by pursuing your dream or whatever. In theory, logic would say, hey, if this is something I really want to do, if I do it, then I'll be happy, right? But there's all these other sort of external variables that you don't see. It's like, you don't see the fucking Mongols at the gates, right? Like, you don't anticipate that happening. You think, oh, well, the American dream. Well, what the fuck is a dream? Dreams aren't real, right? Like, execution in the real world is real. And so you have, I think maybe even the word American dream, like that's sort of a misnomer, because dreams sort of just aren't the right thing to call them. Right? Maybe it's like manifestations in reality. I don't know what the fuck. It'd be a way more boring term than no one would ever say if it was accurate. But I do think that happiness is weird, and you do see that. I saw it in Spain. With you, I went to Spain and spent time in Vigo, and people do seem sort of content. And also, the banks don't open until noon, and they're open for an hour, and everyone's just chilling all the time. So there's also like, it's weird too, because like you have a capitalist society in both places, and in large part, at least in the US, it's measured by like output, I feel like. Whereas, like you said, it's measured more on like work output than it is just family relationships and just kind of living life. I feel like people live life just to live life in other places much more than in the US.
I completely agree. Here is a contrarian statement. I think a lot of people are going to cringe when I say this. Economic prosperity is directly opposed to overall happiness of a country.
Is it on a country level?
Think about it this way, right?
I think Haiti would probably disagree.
Okay, so let's set up some boundaries here.
Okay.
So economic prosperity in terms of, for a country that meets the baseline of needs, right? So the bottom two steps of the pyramid. Anything above that contributes to both economic growth, but also anxiety and discontent and people feeling like they don't have a community. There is again, I recently read that some of the effects that people don't talk about with the sort of the Trump economic policy, that supposedly has grown GDP and has like decreased unemployment and all these different things, is the negative impacts in terms of like elevated levels of anxiety, elevated numbers of suicide and depression, and all the impacts that a highly functioning capitalist country can have on the people, because the people are the ones that are constantly forced to over deliver and to build better and bigger and more risky and more prosperous economic sandcastles.
Yeah.
And what are the effects of, hey, you get home in the evening, go and have a beer with your friends. It's okay. You don't have to build an empire. Like, don't be anxious about having to build $1 billion business. It's okay if you don't. Right?
It's just not in me to think that way, bro.
It is not.
It's so hard. Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think it's true in a lot of ways, actually. For me, just on sort of an N of one basis, I just can't. What makes me happy is to try to build an empire. Like I'd have a beer with you, or 5 of my closer friends, but like to go spend time with a bunch of fucking idiots playing like beer pong on a Taco Tuesday isn't very interesting to me. I'd rather be designing something, doing, but there is something like there is that inescapable desire for growth, and the trap in that is like every business is expected to grow forever, and it's an unrealistic thing, right? Like they're expected to grow more and more and more and more and more infinitely forever, and if you're not, then you're failing as a business, right? Like, and so I think that in a lot of ways that's good, because that's how you get fucking iPhones, right? That's how you get a car. That's how you get a lot of things that were created in this country. But there are a lot of negative externalities as well.
Here's an interesting example. I had a conversation with a fellow entrepreneur the other day that built a sort of a similar company that we are building, but about a decade ago. And he said, we raised all this venture capital, we built this company, we got $35 million in revenue a year, and we failed. And I said, like, what do you mean you failed? And he said, yeah, because we were growing only 25% year over year, not 70%. and obviously, there is the market, which is like, you raise venture capital, there's a certain expectation as to what kind of business you have to build. But just the idea that he built a $35 million business a year with 2 founders that had an incredible lifestyle. And he was so disappointed. Yeah. Because he only built a $35 million business.
Yeah. Fucking chump change, am I right? Fuck. $35 million.
But that speaks about the level of ambition that people like us have. That, we always want to be building just things that are so unimaginable.
Yeah.
At the same time, what is the price? Like another, same article, The Psychology of Money. Another thing that he talked about was, what is the price you pay for being successful? Like, what is the price of success? And what he talked about is most people usually consider the price to be monetary, right? But it's actually not. When you think about Warren Buffett, you say he became the richest man in the world, or the wealthiest man in the world, the second right now. But and you're like, okay, well, he's a pretty well-rounded guy, pretty grounded family guy. But what they don't tell you is that for 75 years, that guy never saw his family because all he did was read 16 hours a day of SEC filings, right?
Yeah.
So that's the price.
I live that life in a lot of ways, which actually, and I think that everybody has sort of a varying level of what they need in terms of their family situation. Like, do you have a dad? Do you have a mom? Do you have some people don't even have a family. I don't have a ton of it. Do you have a significant other in your life? Do you have friends? And one thing that I definitely, the cost of success is a very interesting thing, and it's real. Like, the cost of success, for me at least, has been personal relationships. Like, I don't see my friends as often as I should, right? I don't talk to them as often as I should. And I think that long term that plays out, but for me, it's like, it's a bit of a speed game. It's like, if I can just get through the beginning parts of success to reach that echelon, then I can, over time, sort of optimize for happiness. At least that's the story I tell myself.
So can you define that? Where is the inflection point? Define the inflection point for me.
I think the inflection point is where you don't have to worry about having a salary to pay for your basic needs. I think once you have enough money and you can just make interest on the $1 million+ that you have in a bank, thus to pay for basic living expenses, then you have at least the latitude to not have to think about, oh man, that number every month draining the bank account.
See, that's interesting. My instinct would be to think exactly the same way. Now, when you ask people that are further along in their careers of life than we are, and they look back and they're financially set, they often say, I would give whatever I have to be where you are right now.
Right.
Or you will not feel any different by the time you achieve that, because you will immediately set the next milestone.
Yeah, that's true. It's a moving goalpost for sure.
One of the biggest learning lessons for me is when we raised our second round of financing. It was such a grueling process. We were very close to running out of money and having to shut down the company. And I realized the minute the round was closed, the money was in the bank, we were going to be okay. I didn't go out to celebrate. The minute, I swear to God, the minute that it was like 10 in the morning, we got the response, the round had been finalized. We signed it. 10 minutes later, I was back at my desk stressing out about the hiring plan for the next 6 months on how to deploy that capital.
Yeah, so why weren't you getting beers with your friends, bro?
Because the minute that I went over that hurdle, my mind completely forgot about how I felt before I had accomplished it. And I immediately reset it.
Yeah.
On to the next thing.
Yeah, on to the next one.
And so one of the things that I constantly ask myself is, how are you okay? Or how can you be happy and satisfied with the process today?
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about all the things that you haven't achieved, which I think is a natural instinct for us because we're always shooting so high.
Mm-hmm.
And it continues to be a struggle.
Yeah, it is. There's the thing is you have a finite amount of time to spend, period, on anything. And I think you have to do what makes you happy. And I think that takes a lot of introspection. And for me, at least, I don't need a ton of friends. I don't need 30 people to just give me attention all the time. In person. That's not a thing that I value. Do I value a small group of close-knit friends? Absolutely. And I do think you have to build in structures in your life to make sure that you're feeding those plants in your brain, because as soon as you let them die, that's when sadness happens. That's when depression sets in. That's when burnout and fatigue and all these different things happen. And, I think that it's one of those things where you just have to understand who you are, more than anything else, because I can say from my perspective how I see the world, how my brain functions, but that's just not how everybody else's does it. And I think a lot of people are probably a little bit too scared to ask themselves those real questions. Is working, and you and I both work for ourselves, right? We started our own businesses. Now put yourself in the shoes of the guy at Goldman Sachs that's been there for 10 years and is working the same amount of hours, right? Just from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. or whatever the fuck, and he's working for some suit in the top of a Manhattan skyscraper. And that is, that's something I couldn't do. I couldn't do that. Absolutely not a chance I could do that. So, I would rather be in Thailand on a fishing boat.
You've already been there.
I would be happy. I can find happiness anywhere. I truly believe that. Although I know the things that make me the most happy, but dude, I can fucking be happy living with a fucking shaman in the middle of the jungle. Just murdering anacondas, feeding the village, taking ayahuasca, bro, and fishing and shit like that. Have my little family out there in the middle of the jungle. I could find happiness in that. It'd be fine.
That's true.
But I could not be in that goddamn Goldman Sachs office.
But you know why? I thought about that a lot too, and I think it comes down to freedom.
Dude, freedom is my number one goal, period. Everything in my life maps to freedom. That is the game for me.
One day you wake up and you realize that you become unemployable. But not because you're not smart enough or, competent, but because you appreciate freedom too much. And so everything in your life instantly starts revolving around, how do I gain more freedom?
Yeah.
And I think when you think about the concept of making more money or building a company or, designing your life in a way that it's compelling, it's all about that. It's having the ability to make decisions based on what you think and what you want to do, having the freedom to decide how to spend your time and who to spend your time with, and not be bound by a set of rules and guidelines that were not designed by you. That's it.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and that's my whole thesis on life is optimize for freedom, period. And you'll oftentimes hear that said in the terms of having fuck you money. That's what fuck you money means. Freedom. I have so much fuck you money, you couldn't pay me to do shit. Because I don't give a fuck. I can do anything I want. Oh, want to go hang out at the fucking Seychelles Islands? No problem. Give myself a whatever the fuck. That's what, and that's where the monetary piece sort of meets the freedom is, that's what fuck you money is. You just get to go do whatever you want. Because having the supreme optionality to do whatever you want in life, I think is what at least gives you the absolute, it's like a little ball of Play-Doh. And you can shape that into fucking dollars. You can shape it into hookers and cocaine. You can fucking shape it into kids and a wife. You can, whatever you want to make it into, you can make it into. And when you don't have the option to do anything else, that's when you feel stuck. And at least for me, it feels suffocating.
One of the interesting things is that not everybody feels that way, right? I think there are different types of people that optimize for different things, and the great majority optimize for, a third party or an external sort of institution to design a set of rules that allow them to live their life in a more safe way. And I think the interesting thing and the back and forth for me is having extreme amounts of freedom means you're entirely responsible for the decisions that you make. Meaning when you fuck up, it's entirely on you. And when you make great decisions, then it's also entirely on you. But that freedom, comes with a lot of baggage in the sense that, you make the wrong decision and your life is really going to suffer. And when you run a company, for example, you making the wrong decision not only affects you, but affects a great deal of people. And so when you think about the concept of fuck you money, like you spoke about right now, I think there is also there's a plateau in the sense that, you make enough so that you have that level of freedom where the level of responsibility is manageable. Because you build $1 billion business, trust me, you will struggle to sleep at night because the level of responsibility has outweighed the financial reward or the potential for freedom. And so there's that sweet spot somewhere there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's building $1 billion business.
Unless you get out.
Unless you get out. But then you're gonna get yourself into the next $1 billion business.
But then maybe it's like people are like, hey man, you ever want to start a bar or something cool? And I'm like, that sounds like a fucking horrible business to be in because there's fail at a higher rate, there's a bunch of overhead, nightmare, right? But if you're running that $1 billion business and you really like to fucking make fucking foie gras or whatever you're doing, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to exit from my $1 billion business and I'm going to run a 15-seater Italian cafe, bullshit, whatever, and you're just making gnocchi in the back, and it loses $250,000 a year. And you know what?
It's okay.
That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because you just, you got your cash, you got it. But oftentimes what happens is people keep themselves in that trap. They get to the top and then it's like, oh man, but if I get out of that $1 billion business situation, society is going to look down on me or something, right? It's like the fear of people's expectations and viewpoints on you. Like, oh, he only runs a 15-seater Italian gnocchi restaurant serving foie gras. That guy must be fucking insane, right? Like if today Zucks was like, you know what? Fuck Facebook. I'm out. Ching, ching, ching. Ring that motherfucking register. Buy a Lamborghini. Trade it in for a Bugatti. Skirt down PCH. Open up a 5-table restaurant. And he's just cooking fucking skirt steak. Everybody would think he lost his fucking mind. But that may just be what freedom looks like to him.
That's interesting. Didn't you think that to a certain degree, you talk about, I think a lot of things we talked about is stimulants, right? Challenges and things and new things and new experiences are just ways to stimulate your brain. And that's the name of the game, right? Curiosity is essentially that. And I think there is an addiction to the problems that come with building a business. I am almost positive because it's almost like some months things are just they're working out. They're going well. The company's growing at the rate that it's growing. Things are working. Employees are happy. And I'm constantly running around with my fucking head cut off thinking like, what's the next problem?
Yeah.
I need another problem.
Yeah. I'm bored.
I need another.
Right?
And so sometimes you create them, right?
That's true. Yeah, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes. I think it's almost like being in a bad relationship. You're like, yeah, I mean, there's really good ones good, but I also kind of like a crazy bitch. You know?
It's like a little bit of spice.
Like a little bit of extra hot sauce.
Find yourself a Latina, my friend. That will give you the spice.
Oh man, I've had way too many spices on that front in my life.
Oh god.
Yeah, there is a weird thing where like you do get sort of addicted to process and you get addicted to the new shiny shit sometimes. Like at least for me, one of the things that I know for sure I'm addicted to is starting new shit. Doesn't even matter what it is.
What do you mean starting new shit like a company?
Starting a new side hustle, starting a new website, starting a new fucking design, starting a new podcast, starting a new anything, like creating something out of nothing is what really just fucking gets me off. And it doesn't even matter like if I make $1 off of it. It's not even money driven. So I definitely do get addicted to that. And if there's a money component tied into it, it makes the addiction a little bit stronger. But then again, if it's going too well, I get bored. What's the next thing? What's the next thing?
What's the process when you do one of those things and it doesn't work?
If it doesn't work, in what sense?
So say, for example, right now, I mean, we're recording a podcast, but
Yeah.
I'm sure you've started projects and products and things and little side gigs in the past 10 years that have not worked out, right? So like, what narrative, what do you tell yourself when those things don't work out so you don't lose enthusiasm to continue trying to do it?
It depends on what the goal is, because creating something new for me may be writing a song, and I don't need external market validation to feel whole for creating a song that I like, that tells a story that I've experienced, that I've crafted and thought about and written over time. And if no people ever hear it, that's okay. I don't need to have 1 million fucking listens on Spotify to feel value in that. But I think it depends on the goal. Like, if I start a company and I raise venture capital, then the expectation is return value to your shareholders, right? And so now you are beholden to this external locus of control instead of this internal locus of control. And as soon as that happens, if you don't sell the business or raise a shitload of money from private equity or something like that, then that doesn't feel good, because that you've defined the goal as that thing. And so it really depends on what you do. And I was kicking around this idea of creating a clothing brand, which I definitely am going to do, and I haven't fully executed on it because I haven't had the time yet, but it does not have the goal of making a fuckload of money. It's just some cool shit I want to do. Like, even this podcast, like, it's just some cool shit I want to do. I was like talking to my friends about cool, interesting thoughts. And like, you have a ton of interesting thoughts, which is why I was so stoked to have you on. Like, because I just like it. And if I never make $1 from it, that's fine. If it costs me money to do it, like, okay.
So it's one of those things where you're enjoying the process.
Yeah.
But is it everything? So for example, it's your company. Is it about enjoying the process?
No.
Or is it about the outcome?
It's about making that Gitas, baby.
So then it's about setting the right expectation.
Yeah, it's
start something.
It's the goal. Yeah, it's saying, what is the fucking goal here? What is the goal? Because if your goal is sell the business, you don't do that. That doesn't feel good. But if the goal is to enjoy the process of making something, then you're probably going to hit that every time. And if you don't enjoy making the thing or the process of what you're doing, and the goal was to enjoy making the process, then you just stop doing it. Start another one.
Let's switch gears for a second. Let me ask you something. How would you define the modern man?
Weak.
Wow. So much hope. So much hope.
Look, you know how I define the modern man? When I look at the men around me, generally speaking, and this doesn't go for my close friends, it doesn't go for, a lot of people, but I think in aggregate, a lot of those dudes are weak fucking bitches. A lot of them. I think it's a huge fucking problem. And, something that Tim Kennedy said on a podcast somewhere that I heard, and I can't remember who to attribute this quote to actually, but he says something like, strong men create safe societies, and safe societies create weak men who create weak societies, who create strong men who create safe societies. And it's this fucking feedback loop where you have strong men that protect the people, and you don't have war and genocide and all this crazy shit. And we're living in one of the safest times we've ever lived in as a human species, ever. Like, by far. Like, there are no Mongols at the gates. There are no marauding Vikings in the fucking bay ready to just rape and pillage your village. Like, no one's there. And so by virtue of that, you have a lot of fucking weakness that happens in the society. And what happens then? The society will slowly break down and weaken. And then you have to have, you know what I mean? And so I think that feedback loop is true. And I think that we're currently experiencing a very, very fluffy environment. I think everybody wants to nerf the world. No sharp edges. Everybody's got to be really buttoned up and politically correct and watch everything you say and tiptoe around all the shit. because people are too sensitive and fucking pussies, because there are no actual external threats to society right now. Like, you don't have to worry, at least in this country, in large part, about, you know, a lot of danger relative to the way that humans have lived for 200 plus thousand years. And so I do think that man, in some ways, the good in that is that they're more educated, right? You're more educated, you're more empathetic, you're more kind and understanding to some extent for certain people's plight. And I think a lot of that has to do with the internet and just the availability of information, broadly speaking. But I do think that men face sort of this thing, and you hear this like toxic masculinity, or that masculinity is bad. And I think that's fucking bullshit. I think it's people that just want to control people. You know, is femininity bad? I don't think so. So I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's kind of how
great.
I feel.
That's exactly what I want.
Not that I've thought about this at all.
I can tell. You haven't spent a second thinking.
Not 1 minute.
So to me, it's interesting because I tend to compare role models of the last, you know, call it the 1920s to today, right? The last 100 years. And let's think about men in this case. You know, we're both men, so we look up to other role models, mostly men. So I think about, you take the industrialist, you know, back in the 20s, you had Henry Ford. And then 50s and 60s, I was watching a great documentary the other day about Gianni Agnelli, the founder of Fiat. Well, the founder family of Fiat and about Ferrari. And essentially, you know, a tremendous force in Italy. And sort of what has the like 1960s, you know, Roger Moore, Sean Connery, Gianni Agnelli evolved into today? You know, what is that? Who is that person today?
Young Jeezy.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's sad.
I'm extremely saddened by that, because you don't have a role model of a man. But the problem is because society doesn't reward that, right? Like back in the day, those men were role models because society admired them, right? Their contribution. And nowadays, you know, the gentlemen are not admired. There are no values that are sort of, you know, watchable on YouTube and entertaining, and so, you know, being like that doesn't pay dividends. Hence why you have, you know, stupid YouTube celebrities that you know, amount to nothing and provide no value, no education of any kind, because society doesn't want that. They rather look at Jake Paul than look at like David Attenborough on you know, planet Earth. That's really sad. It
is sad. And, you know, I think one thing that you said that resonated with me is being a gentleman. And that, I think that's like, to be masculine is to be a gentleman, right? It is to open doors for women and men, because you're just a gentleman. Like you're being a kind man, a strong, kind man. I think that's what men should be. You should be strong, both mentally and physically. You should be kind, mentally and physically, always. And I don't think that there's a lot of good role models. And unfortunately too, and like if you listen to, going back to rap lyrics, like if you listen to some of the actual lyrics of the songs, you want to talk about some misogynistic insanity. It's all in there. And like, and in large part, young people look up to those people, right? Like, you know, like fucking hoes, and like, you know, treating women not like they should be treated, as a strange, like almost subconscious celebration of that thing that no one really talks about, and they've never really talked about it. I find it very strange.
You know, one of the things I always use something as an example is there's two things. One is more controversial than the other, but I'll give you both examples. So the first story is the oxygen mask story. And the idea is when you're on a plane and you have your child sitting next to you, the guidelines say put the mask on yourself before you put it on your child, right? Mm-hmm. You remember seeing this, right? And they repeat it over and over again. And I think to myself, you know, my grandparents and my parents, when they brought me up, all they lived for was me, right? Their dedication, their money, their, always working to be of service and to make my life easier. I remember my grandfather, he did so much. He ran the family, he ran the show, he provided security, safety, all these different things that made me feel like I was protected. And nowadays I feel like society is saying, hey, you don't have to be that way anymore. Don't worry. It's a generation of the self. Take care of yourself first, and then maybe you can take care of others. But don't forget, take care of yourself first. Right. And I think there's something fundamentally off about that. The fact that, we're being trained to always put yourself first. And suddenly this whole, like, I see a lot of this in the health and wellness movement of, take care of yourself and, like, go to yoga and be in peace and, always think about you and take care of you and, like, wake up at the right time and go to bed at the right time and, like how are you going to start a fucking family?
Namaste, bro.
Namaste, right? Like, you don't think your child should be your priority? You don't think that, like, God, like, I remember my grandparents, they paid, my grandmother was a high school teacher, right? And my grandfather worked for the government. Very modest salaries. They saved enough money over their lifetime to buy 3 houses and pay 5 children education, university education for 5 grandkids. And so when they passed away, they left us 5 grandchildren enough money to pay for university. So I didn't have to get a fucking loan when I went to school. And so I was like, by the way, the university in Europe is $1,000 a year. Yeah, so it's a little different. But my point is, they lived for others, right? They lived to take care of the people around them. And that model, it's gone. It's completely gone. So what the fuck is going to happen when YouTube celebrities have kids? What are those kids going to look like?
You know what they're going to look like? They're going to look like having a nanny all day, every day, and they barely see their parents. And I also think it's a function of how big of a city you're in. Like in the city of Los Angeles, what I see oftentimes, right? Like I'm going to go box or whatever, and I'm riding my motorcycle past, nannies, with kids in strollers. And not that there's anything wrong with that. In all likelihood, I'll be having some component of that in my life at some juncture. However, like if that's all you're doing, you're a bad parent. You know what I mean? Like my dad was extraordinarily selfless. So selfless. I mean, he's so selfless in the fact that, like, if he never even, like we're really good friends, but like if I had a lesser good friend, some acquaintance of some sort that he had never met, and they went to jail, he would drive 2 hours to bail them out and not even fucking tell me, probably. Because he was just that guy. Like, he was so incredibly selfless. And me growing up and watching that, I can only try to even be, a speck of semblance of what he was. So my perspective on it is, it's a highly individualized thing. And I think that when you move into bigger societies, you see less humanity. You see less
more prosperous too. Bigger, more prosperous.
Way more prosperous. Like if you broke down on the side of the road, on the freeway in LA, on the 405, how many motherfuckers you think are going to stop and see if you're okay? Zero. None. There will not be one. Meanwhile, in like where I grew up in like a small rural community, name your community, right? You're in like Sturgis, South Dakota or something like that. You will be accosted by so many people, it will become annoying to tell them, no, I'm good. I got it. Yeah, no, don't worry. AAA's coming.
So here's a concept for you. People born and grown in hardship tend to be kinder, more humble, and more selfless than people born in privilege.
Sometimes.
Or in affluent or prosperous economic times.
In some sense, yeah. In some sense, definitely, if they're good people. But what I do think is that what poverty does uniquely provide is a certain concoction of terrible circumstances that can bring out the worst aspects of people's personalities that they normally wouldn't have. Like, when I was living in San Diego, I was living in really terrible neighborhoods, right? And so all of my neighbors were pimps and thieves and drug dealers and all this kind of shit. And would they be pimps, thieves, and drug dealers if they grew up in Brentwood and went to the country day school or whatever the fuck? Probably not.
No, but they might be assholes.
They might be assholes. Definitely might be assholes.
Now, if they grew up in central Nebraska, what would they be like?
Probably smoking meth. Having 500 kids on welfare. I don't know, So it's like, you do see I think the difference is, in the poor communities, what you'll find is more danger. What you'll find in the affluent communities are people backstabbing you, right? Like, they're going to backstab you, they're going to connive you, they're going to, talk shit to the principal to make sure that your kid doesn't get in, private elementary school or whatever. And then in the hood, they're just going to find you in an alley, catch you slipping, and beat the fuck out of you.
But you're also, that's highly contextualized to the U.S. When you go to much more socialist countries like the northern countries, or even like Spain or Italy, it's a different story.
Yeah.
Right? Like the state is designed to take care of its people. Pension plans are public. There's public free healthcare. Taxes are taken away from your paycheck before you even smell them. So, like, things are set up in a way in which it fosters a certain level of community and equality, right? Everybody's on the same boat, right? The problem with capitalism and I think the way that we run this country is that it fosters prosperity to the top of the pyramid, but like it leaves the entire bottom part unattended, and wishing and trying to like do whatever it takes to get to the top. Mm-hmm. And so, it can get tricky. And I'm going to ask you something. Project California, Los Angeles, 20 years into the future. What does that look like?
Apocalypse.
Zombie apocalypse.
Absolute zombie apocalypse. You're going to have
homeless people everywhere.
You're going to have White Walkers falling out of skyscrapers on top of people's cars, ripping them out of the windshield. And just, no, I really like zombies. I wish that was true, but it's not. I don't know. I do think that there's negative externalities no matter what system you're in, right? Like how's socialism working out for Venezuela? Let me know. How's it working out in North Korea or Cuba or the USSR? Oh, wait, they're not anymore. China, right? They're all, they're all moving towards capitalism for a reason, and that's because it does bring economic prosperity. And what happens is when you even the playing field too much, you disincentivize people from fucking doing shit. Like when you think about Russia, right? And it's one of the bigger sort of examples of a totally communist state. What product or service, for that matter, has Russia produced in the past 30 years that you use? Name one.
No.
Oh, wait. It's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. And that's one of the next negative externalities about that. Yeah, you may feel safe and you may be all on the even playing field, but that's where you stay. You're not moving up. And so if I can make the same amount of money being sitting on my fucking ass, not doing shit, or doing crazy med school and getting my MD and becoming a brain surgeon, but I get paid the same, well, I'm just going to fucking play PlayStation.
So here's the summary, I think, of this is everything works in cycles. From chaos to stability, and then slightly like degenerating into chaos.
So that's the LA question then.
But think about it this way, right? So I do not know, I'm not as informed about this country, but I can tell you about my own and how the cycles have worked in the past 50 years. Very simple. We went from a civil war in 1936 to a 40-year dictatorship until 1975, 39-year dictatorship. And
This is where?
Spain.
Yeah.
So 1936 to 1975. 1975, democracy gets established. 40-something years later, absolute chaos. Our political system is a fucking nightmare. There's 4 or 5 parties trying to like create coalitions to get into government. There's revolts and there is people are angry. And so, we've gone from a 70-year cycle to a 40-year cycle. What is this going to end up? I mean, it's going to end up in absolute chaos. And what's going to happen is either an incredibly right-wing party is going to take over and turn it into some sort of like incredibly strict democracy to bring, peace or to bring order, or we're going to swing the other way and everything's going to become a fucking nightmare where, nobody wants to work. Everybody wants to make more money. Everyone wants healthcare to be paid for. And so, I feel like there is this cycles across different generations, and it's impossible to just be stable.
I think so too. It's a dichotomy, right? I mean, it's a dichotomy of, absolutes of any one thing is usually not good. It's usually somewhere in the middle. It's the sweet spot you hear people talk about. And, you get people on their high horse about, oh man, well, absolute X is the best thing. Rarely is that true. I mean, very rarely. We don't even have a pure democracy in this country. It's a representative democracy, right? You vote for people to go vote on your behalf. You don't have fucking voting for the shit that Congress is voting on. You voted for some other dummy to go make that decision for you. And so, it's like it's a strange balance. I think that any one thing in its purest form is usually not the best solution to the majority of the world's problems.
Hold on a second. I'm going to take one example that you're going to be able to relate to. Your people, Northern Europe.
Yeah.
You got 3 countries there.
The Scandinavians.
Incredible economic prosperity. Arguably some of the most stable democracies. Yeah. In Europe, that's definitely.
Yeah.
And economic prosperity, good health, high education. Who talks about issues in Sweden's democracy? Nobody.
Well, there's a couple things about Scandinavia, right? Some hidden variables. One is it's a very culturally and
aligned,
ethnically homogenous place.
Correct.
Everybody's Scandinavian. The vast majority are Scandinavians that live there. The vast majority are culturally Scandinavian as well, right? And so that makes for one cohesive community, right? Like in the U.S., it's not like that. You have people from every single culture all over the place with different religions and perspectives and, conservatism and liberalism and everything in between from all over the place. And it's like trying to herd cats. And in Scandinavia, you're herding a bunch of Icelandic sheep. It's much easier. Everybody's culturally and ethnically homogenous. The other lurking variable in that is that oftentimes, if you talk to somebody from Sweden or Norway, they'll say to you, well, the problem there is that if you have the perception, if you do want to create that $1 billion business, right? We were talking about freedom earlier. If you do want to create something that is sort of above and beyond what the baseline good living is, you are viewed as a villain.
Yeah.
People do not like that.
Agreed.
So there's a big crabs in a bucket problem there. Whereas like, oh, you want to start Catalog? You must be a fucking piece of shit, huh, Jacobo? Look at this fucking guy over here just trying to do something for his life. This guy should burn him. But that's real. Like that sort of society does make people feel like if you're trying to get outside that box, they want to put you back in.
That's true, yeah. I do feel like that somewhat in my own country. I think, we have one of the most successful entrepreneurs of all time, arguably, with Zara. Amancio Ortega, who's literally my neighbor, and one of the wealthiest people, best sort of well-regarded leaders in industry and industrialism. And this guy, it's not appreciated in Spain. whatsoever. And he's the third richest man in the world, fourth, and built one of the biggest companies in history, and we don't seem to give a shit. I think it's very sad. Yeah. But I think it's aligned with what you said, which is, you become different, and then it's a problem. Well, here, everybody's different because everybody comes from a different place. And here's an interesting thing, right? As borders and countries become less differentiated, I think it's just the interaction between cultures is going to continue to happen more and more. And the socioeconomic problems are going to get bigger and bigger and more complex. And I think, when with countries like Spain or the south of Europe and Northern Europe, they're still highly differentiated. As in, everybody in Spain, 99% of Spain is Catholic, right? And so we don't have issues with immigration. We don't have issues with culture because everybody fucking eats jamon and bread and sleep siestas, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be super interesting when that changes over time, and how are people going to react to that?
Well, I also think it's definitely a factor and a function of the United States. I think that the U.S. By virtue of the way that it was founded, and it's one of the newest countries, right? In a lot of respects, at least. And it's one of those places where there was some Europeans that came over and came to this place. The people that were here were dying of diseases primarily, and some war. And then whoever could just move here. It's like the land of the free and the home of the brave and the Statue of Liberty, and we take your whatever the fuck it is, right? So I think that it's easy to wrap yourself up in the American bubble a little bit. I think that when you do look at other countries, they're not going to experience the level that we have here, right? And certainly not in the places outside of the large cities. If you go to, for instance, if you go to Stockholm in Sweden, you'll go there and you'll see, it's an international city. There's an international airport. People are coming through. They're visiting. It's tourism. It's all that stuff. And then you go to Karlstad, and it's all Scandinavia. There's nobody else. Similarly, in Spain, right? You go to Madrid. There's going to be people from all over the place. And then you go to Vigo. Not so much. Yeah. Or you go to Catalonia. What's up with Catalonia?
Spain?
Not from what I understand, bro. Las banderas de independencias, no?
Jesus, yeah, don't get me started on that. We get way too political.
Yeah, that's true.
Too much emotion into the conversation.
Yeah, I guess Barcelona is not part of Spain anymore, is what that...
that's what they would like.
That's what they...
Look, they can pay us the money they owe us, and they can leave if they want.
Yeah, pay up.
Yeah.
You imagine?
It'll only take them 30 years or so.
Who's the last king of Spain?
It's is there
a king of Spain now, or is that?
There is a king of Spain. I would say the monarchy is not in its best times, but so there was a king that abdicated maybe 7-8 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, and it was Juan Carlos, and then his son, his name is Felipe, and Philip, whatever you want to call it,
Felipe,
and he's the current king. But there's definitely no shortage of drama around the monarchy these days.
Yeah.
I do believe actually it's a great thing for a country. I think for us it provides stability. I think it's a non-political advocate for the country, and I actually quite like it.
You know who our king and queen is, right?
In the United States?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's like Justin Timberlake and Kim Kardashian. How fucked is that? How fucking insane is that?
Yeah.
It's like Elvis and Whitney Houston.
So here's a problem that I have with that is there's a fundamental lack of culture and education with some of the most prominent figures in media in this country. I have a huge problem with that. How are you going to lead and influence people in a positive, constructive way when I tell you, do you want to go to war with North Korea? And you say yes. And it's like, okay, point to me North Korea. And they go to fucking Portugal. I'm like, come on, Yeah. And so I do have a problem with that because you can lead a massive statewide conversation when you have nothing to say,
Yeah.
or at least nothing to say that is formative.
Yeah.
So we've replaced Mr. Rogers with fucking Justin Bieber and Jake Paul. And that worries me, dude.
Yeah, it worries me too.
Because you still have, at least we still have the interest and the curiosity to go and look up certain things and learn and travel and educate ourselves. But dude, like, I don't see a lot of people doing that anymore.
Well, I'm going to miss my episode of Desperate Housewives, Jacobo. I like that show. I got to watch the Jersey Psychic or whatever the fuck.
So why is that? Why is that? Why is it more interesting to watch Desperate Housewives than to watch Planet Earth? Why? I don't understand it. I don't understand it because to me, it isn't. So I find it very difficult to understand.
I would love to know. I would love to know. But I think it's because people are fucking stupid. Some of them. But some educated people like it too, which is a real mindfuck. I would love to be able to say like, oh, well, everybody that watches X bullshit show, whatever, is just dumb. That's why they watch it. But that's not true because a lot of educated people also watch dumb shit. I don't know. I probably watch a lot of dumb shit too, though. Like I'm always watching like animal attack videos. You know, I'm watching like
it's so
street
easy.
fights and subways and shit. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm in a sub car in New York City, right, close quarters, everybody's got jackets on, absolutely getting collar choked, 9 times out of 10. but so I know the answer, but I just keep watching it.
It's interesting.
Yeah. What's something stupid that you watch?
God, it's something I'd be willing to admit. I'm not thinking about it. Look, I meme accounts.
Yeah.
Meme accounts on
Ooh, that's a
Instagram.
good one.
I mean, they're idiotic.
Yeah.
They're absolutely idiotic. But I find it entertaining.
Yeah.
And the thing is, entertainment, it's so much easier than learning. Like, you know, it's just there. It's there. It's like, you know, you just flick your fucking finger and it's right there.
It's a mindless activity.
Exactly. Like if I want to learn something, I got to pay $5 a month to read Wired magazine online. But fucking like entertainment is just right there.
But I go to the Fat Jewish right now.
It's right now.
I can go to Dan Bilzerian's page and see all the ass and titties I want
Exactly.
for $0.
$0.
Put zero effort into learning anything.
Doesn't cost you a dime. And so we've just made it easier. Again, you know, talk about path of least resistance. Your mind just fucking goes there. And so I am excited though. You know, there's an interesting, I think, analogy here. When you think about Peloton, for example, you know, incredibly fast growing company about to go public. They've somehow managed to figure it out how to take something so fucking painful as it is exercising and turning it into a game. Where you got all this like just fucking hundreds of thousands of people that wouldn't do jack shit. Now they buy a bike and they fucking exercise 45 minutes a day.
Right.
I've met 10 people that lost 30 pounds in 2 months. I'm like,
yeah.
And now how do you take that and apply that to culture and just general education? Know how, or like know things about the world that matter and that are meaningful. Like how to fucking point a fucking country.
Right.
Differentiate between Korea and Portugal, for fuck's sake. Like how do you gamify that so it becomes entertainment?
Yeah, gamification may be the answer to a lot of those things. I feel like that's what, you know, CrossFit did as sort of like a precursor to the Peloton thing. It's like, oh, well, now it's just like this thing. It's like a game, you know? It's like the CrossFit Games. You show up to the spot and everyone's doing it. It's like instead of just going into a gym and just, you know, doing curls or whatever you're doing in there. And then Peloton's one step even further in that direction, in that it's in your house or wherever you want it to be, essentially wherever you can put the bike at, which is interesting. And I don't know, I think in large part it's like, what's the top of the funnel consideration for what people should know? You know, because I think that generally speaking, education, the vast majority of it is a bunch of bullshit that we don't need to know at all. You know, even when you're studying like in business school, a lot of the shit you just never get taught. You don't get taught how to manage a cap table. You know, you don't.
But I'm not talking about that education though. I'm talking about the education that if I go to anyone on the street, right? We walk outside, and we should run this experiment sometime.
I'd love to do
and that. We ask some things like, tell me a little bit about the situation in Libya. What about Syria? What about what happened in Yemen? What about the fucking refugees, invading Bangladesh? What about the Rohingya? What about like all this basic, like modern issues, right? Like, I just, what about genocides that happen in Central Africa? But they don't there's no, there's a drought in Cape Town where in December of 2019, Cape Town is out of water. Day 0, right? Do you walk outside? Does the average person know that? So at least they have empathy and familiarity with issues that are happening outside of their fucking neighborhood? No, they don't know that. That's what I talk about education and culture. Like, those are things you need to know. Right? You can't just focus on your local bullshit. Right? You need to understand if you want to be a well-rounded individual that like speaks to 10 million fucking subscribers on YouTube, like you need to know those things.
Well, the weirdest thing about that to me is that I actually, my perspective on it is actually the inverse. I think people are too consumed with national news, international news. They don't
with national or international?
Primarily national,
okay, and
even international over what's happening on their own block. For instance,
okay,
in Los Angeles, let's call it a 5-block radius where you live. You live in West Hollywood area?
West Hollywood, yeah.
Within a 5 to 10 block radius of your house, how many homicides has there been in the last, I don't know, since January?
I'm sure many.
How many?
I have no idea.
No fucking clue, right? I am guilty of this. Guilty as charged, knowing more shit about national and international affairs than local affairs. And I was watching the Santa Monica News for some reason, and some homeless dude fucking murdered, like this dude that was deported. I mean, he's like, I was from El Salvador or somewhere, and he snuck back in, and then he murdered like 10 people with an axe. Like fucking quarter mile from my office. I asked every single person in my office, not one of them knew about it. But they know that the Mueller report,
Yeah, but I'm going to challenge you on that, because what I'm talking about is it's not having incredible depth across any of those things or disciplines. What I'm talking about is a general understanding of how the world works.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that like, what was apartheid? Like, do you know the evolution of how it worked and what happened and who the main figures were? And like, can you explain to me why society is the way it is today and how it came to be? Can you backtrack 30 or 40 years to at least have some sort of fucking memory? Because let me tell you something. When I was 16 years old, I was taken to Auschwitz, the concentration camp in Poland, southern Poland. I walked through the sort of the prison homes where they held people, right? And people were bawling, people were crying, and I walked in there, and my fucking like my skin just tightened up, and like I felt this thing where I was like, holy fucking shit! I never really knew what this was, the Holocaust was, until I walked into this place, and then you have extreme movements of young people today that have no fucking clue about what happened less than 60 years ago, 70 years ago, right? And so when memories are so short and there's no understanding of, how the world works, then these people will develop mental models that are just in a vacuum, that have no idea of what happens 10,000 miles away and have no idea what happened just a few decades ago. So how are they supposed to build a better world into the future if they have no fucking clue of what the world looked like only a generation ago?
Yeah. History will repeat itself in very ugly ways if you don't understand it.
At least a version of it, right?
I mean, that's how you get Antifa. You know what I mean?
I don't know what Antifa is.
Antifa is the anti-fascist. It's
anti-fascist,
super far left-wing people that put black face masks on and they just basically jump people with bats and shit, some real pussy shit, you know? And they're just trying to control people's thoughts, basically. And, you know, what that looks like is the fucking USSR thugs, you know, in like the 1960s and 70s, you know, in East Germany and shit. Like, that's what that is. That's literally fucking exactly what that is. It's crazy.
But if you ask them, they probably wouldn't know.
They have no idea. No idea, because it's new to them.
So this is
Brand new.
This is what I'm talking about. So maybe I should have framed it around.
No, I totally
history,
agree.
But it's a fundamental understanding of how the world works today, how the world worked a few decades ago, and what the evolution has been, right? And fuck, like people say, oh, we're so hopeful about the younger generations, you know, the future, and like they're gonna like, you know, fix the pollution problem and the plastics problem, and I'm like, what? What hope? What? On what? Well, they can't even tell the difference between fucking like what's recyclable and what's not. Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Like, there's some basic things that, you know, you fucking get a plastic bottle and you look at the little symbol, and the little symbol tells you exactly what fucking bin you put the bottle on, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and so there are things like that that to me are so fundamental that we've completely lost interest on, because, you know, commenting on the state of cultural bullshit, what happens with the Kardashians, has become more entertaining.
It's true, and it gets all the media attention too.
And so, how do we change that? I want to change that. I want to help change that.
I think the problem with you, bro, is that you're a fucking round earther. We all know the Earth is flat. Okay? And you're covering up the evidence.
There was a tweet from the Flat Earth Society.
Space is fake. And you and your bullshit CG.
There was a tweet from the Flat Earth Society that mentioned something about the globe. And I'm like, doesn't that fucking fundamentally contradict what you're saying?
Dude, you're a globist. You're a globist. You're a fucking globetrotter, bro. You fucking globetrotting all over. But that's, all jokes aside, like, that's kind of a lot of the problem. Like, you want to talk about, you know, what happened in history so we don't repeat it. Meanwhile, there are people that think the Earth is flat. You ever heard of Magellan? They're like, yeah, sure did. He was a fucking bullshit artist. Because they just, you know, they can just make up shit. They
fell off the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all dead.
They're all dead.
They're all dead.
Because they fell off.
All flat Earth believers are dead because they accidentally fell off. Just like, yeah, man, that is true.
I don't know, man. Like, I do ask myself this question often. To be completely, I feel guilt because here I am, or here we are, building our companies and building our life and doing all those different things. And then there's this fucking, to me, it's like a cancer. It's a fucking cancer in society where people just know less and less every time and have less of a historical perspective. Even though it's easier to access the information.
Right.
You don't have to go to a fucking library. Like, seriously.
That's ironic, isn't it?
It blows my mind. And so
all the information at the tip of your finger.
Right there.
But I think maybe the problem is you also have all the disinformation too.
Yeah. That's not an excuse, though.
It's because the Earth is flat, bro, and you know it. I'm going to get some hate mail for sure.
Oh, yeah.
From all the flat earthers out there. There can't be that many of them, right? Can't be that many.
Oh, you can always push them off.
That's true.
The edge.
Dude,
on the ledge.
You're like, bro, no, I'm totally into it. Just show me where the ledge is at. And then you just get there and you Hadouken! And you just fucking give them that Spartan kick straight off the fucking ledge of the Earth.
Kick them into orbit.
Yeah, kick them into orbit. I wish I could go into orbit. That'd be fucking awesome.
You know what I wanted to do, and I can say this because my dad doesn't actually speak English. So I actually, for one of his upcoming birthdays, I want to get him one of those zero gravity flights. You know, I'm just manning up to the idea of spending $9,000, but I wanted to do it for his 60th birthday. And then, unfortunately, I wasn't able to. I became a startup founder.
Yeah. Yeah, startup founder, a.k.a.
living in ramen.
Broke. Yeah. A lot of Nissan.
Exactly.
A lot of top ramen in my...
Don't finish that sentence. So,
how dare you?
I've been wanting to do that for a while. Have you ever done those? What are those called? Those like fans, the fan tubes that you put on the floor and you can jump on it. And
I've seen it been done, but I haven't done it myself. No.
I'm intrigued to do that.
It seems fine.
Zero gravity sounds pretty fun.
Well, zero gravity would be dope.
Imagine we could get all of our buddies into one of those planes and then just fucking mess around.
And then just
zero gravity.
Float?
Yeah, just barf on each other. One of the two. Or probably both. Yeah, exactly.
So barf would also be weightless. So it would just float.
Absolutely.
That is so fucking disgusting.
Hey, so here's a question. What is an experience you want to have that you've been thinking about for a while?
Experience that I want to have. Ooh.
That you haven't had.
Experience that I want to have that I haven't had. You know, I don't know, man.
A place you want to go.
Place I want to go? I want to go everywhere. Everywhere.
Well, that's a place.
You know, I want to go, this is where I want to go. I want to go up to Alaska or northern Alberta, Canada, and go hunt with a bow and arrow with a sidearm just in case the grizzly comes and fucking and just fucking murders me and whoever I'm with.
And you're just shooting with a little bow and arrow.
Don't want that.
Sounds a lot like a cartoon.
Yeah. But I would like to get a cabin off the grid, way away from everybody. I just want to live off the land for like a month. And then, you know, whether somebody wants to come with me or not, could be alone, could have friends come, doesn't even matter. And then fucking just roam in the ice forest and trap beavers and eat them and wear their pelts.
That sounds exciting.
Catch some fucking salmon, bro.
I'll come up for a weekend.
It'd be so fun. Eat some caribou ribs. Get them out. Not a lot of plants you can eat up there.
That's true. That's actually sounds like such a fun plan.
Yeah. There's this documentary called Hi-Mo from Vice. It's one of the oldest documentaries that they've done way before they became massive. And man, it's so fucking crazy about this dude. And he went up there, he went up to the Arctic Circle in Alaska. Like at the very top, it's in, you know, whatever the national park is up there. So you can't build anymore. But he's grandfathered in because he moved there in like the 60s or 70s or something like that. And the dude grew up in Wisconsin. He's like, fuck this, I'm just going off the grid. So he moved up there and he just has 2 or 3 cabins that are stocked with whatever the fuck. He just lives off the land, completely off the land. Middle of fucking nowhere, no cell phone reception, none of that shit. And he just hunts, traps beavers, fucking hunts whatever, you know, caribou, fish is up there. Got himself an Eskimo or an Inuit wife, and then they both live up there. Had a daughter drown in the fucking river, bro, as a child, because like they all like it's like a really old school like nomadic living situation where everybody's got to like, you know, get your stuff and go down to fucking ford the river to get where we got to go in the winter. Yeah. And dude, it's like one of the craziest, like coolest documentaries that you'll ever watch.
I'd love to watch that.
Yeah.
See, that I would watch.
Yeah. Hi-Mo.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
God. That'd be terrifying though.
No way.
Not for you, but for the rest of us humans.
Yeah, I get that. It does kind of sound scary.
I was thinking about going on holiday to like Costa Rica or something, but I guess.
What about Tulum?
I guess I come up with a better story now. Let me think. Give me a few seconds.
What about Paris? Seems safer there.
So one of the things that my dad and I travel every year, as you know, mostly by motorcycle, but one of the trips that we've wanted to do for a while is actually, we're both captains, as you know too. We wanted to rent a sailboat in the Philippines and sail across the islands for about 3 weeks. And we started planning it a couple of years ago. And, we started talking to a bunch of local people. One of the issues that we have down there is pirates.
Yeah.
A hell of a lot of pirates.
Yeah.
And so we're like, okay, well, is there an area or a region where it's actually safer? And they said yes, but there's this one place in Mindoro. We have to go and you basically buy weapons. And what you need to do is you gotta go and rent your sailboat, go get yourself a couple of rifles. And when you start seeing boats going around you, which will happen. You shoot a couple of times in the sky, and they'll go away.
Dude, I'll be the fucking rifleman for sure.
And I was like, let me think about that.
I'm not a captain, but I know how to shoot a gun. I'll just shoot their fucking boat, bro.
Retrofit the sailboat with the...
Dude, I'll just fucking pop, pop, pop. Enjoy sinking to the bottom of the ocean, you fuck.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, yeah. But you know, that's a fun trip.
That sounds super exciting.
I'm trying to build up the courage.
Bro, look. Take a couple dudes that can shoot a gun, okay? You and your pops, captain the boats.
Couple of grenades.
Yeah, I don't know if they blow up underwater, but
dozen grenades.
better have a good throwing arm. Gonna have to be pretty accurate.
Exactly.
That's fucking crazy,
We're
dude.
gonna fishing for some pirates.
Pirates, oh my god.
That's crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Crazy. I mean, there's a lot of stories, reports of tourists and tourist boats getting kidnapped and showing up, 50 dead and 2 weeks later.
Dude.
It's pretty crazy. So I'm trying to rethink that. The other thing that we thought about too is buying an old Mercedes 190 SL, the diesel ones.
Like a 1970.
No, it's like those are 1980s.
Oh,
right, 1980s. And they look exactly the same as the 1970s. The ones that all the gypsies have in Spain. And actually driving it from Algiers and northern Africa all the way south through Morocco, Mauritania, like all over the coast.
Oh yeah, that sounds way safer. Are you fucking insane?
Actually, no, this is a legit thing that people do. They'll buy the car out there, they'll drive it down, and they'll abandon it basically at the end of the trip. It costs you like $800 to buy the car.
I thought about doing that to go all the way from here to Brazil in a van and do the same exact shit.
That's actually not bad. That's actually safer. Well, that depends what route you take.
Yeah.
But the Pan American Highway, up until you get to possibly Colombia. No.
Dude, Sinaloa?
Oh,
Get yourself some of that cartel action.
I don't think so.
No?
I remember Ari's dad used to tell me all the stories about him, driving up and down and taking buses and stuff. And apparently it's not that unsafe. It's not that, nowadays, I don't know back in the day what it was, but nowadays it's not too bad.
Well, Tijuana is now back in the world's most dangerous city on the planet in terms of homicides.
Are you serious?
Yeah, dead
I thought
serious.
You told me it was fairly okay when you
I go there all the time, or have gone there a million times. Never felt danger once in my life. I also speak Spanish, so that helps a lot. And I'm also not doing a bunch of sketchy ass shit, because that's really where you get in trouble. But it's primarily cartel on cartel violence or people in the drug trade. But the bodies, it's a pretty significant number.
Just show up?
Yeah, there's a lot. I think it was maybe a month ago, there was like 5 heads hanging from one of the main bridges in TJ.
Jesus
Christ. A rival cartel or whatever.
So here's another interesting question for you. Immigration.
Touchy subject. Yeah, we might have to save that for the next podcast.
Pencil that one in.
We're going to pencil that one in, dude. We've already gone almost 2 hours, bro.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
God,
flew by, huh?
We can bullshit.
We can bullshit for
not
way longer than this.
Jeez, we're boring.
Well, now comes the time where people can check out Catalog at catalog.cc.
Or at Catalog Official.
At Catalog Official. See all them pretty pictures on the gram.
That's true.
Anything else you want to plug, brother?
Just read and learn and be curious, please. I'll say one more thing. There's this great thing that Tim Ferriss asks in his podcast, and he asks people, if there's one thing you could put on a billboard, somewhere busy where everybody could see, what would you put? And the one thing that I would put is just think. Just fucking think. Use the brain of yours. Whenever you're about to make a stupid ass decision, just think.
That's great. Think, bitches. We're out. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and thank you to Kobo. That was a fun one. Also, thank you to Bar Nana. Head over to barnana.com, barnana.com. Use code NIK and get 20% off of your order. And until next time, I will chat at you then. Peace.